Assalamualaikum and hi. Okay, now we goes to the second part of this module, which is talk about is will be discussed on the process in demand forecasting. So, as you know, when we do demand management, we managing the demand, we need to focus the demand in highly efficient. But then, what are the process involved in the demand forecasting? So in this part, it will discuss more on the demand forecasting itself. In demand forecasting, usually we looks into the types of the strategy in demand forecasting model. So there are three types of demand forecasting model, and some companies they use all these three types of model, and some companies only use one type of model. So it is depends to the objective, to the vision and mission of the company itself. Okay, so the first one, the demand forecasting is what you call as judgmental forecasting. Okay, so judgmental is quite subjective, is compared to the rest model because it is based on the intuition, and it is preferred in situation when there is limited no historical, no previous data on the sales. Okay, so this is usually happens when they want to do a demand forecasting for a new product, a new launch product. Okay, so in the demand forecasting model that use the judgmental forecasting, usually they need to learn more about the consumer preferences and intentions to buy the goods. So they have the need to possess a strong understanding of survey designs and population sampling methodologies. So because it is required in doing these types of model, and one challenges that one challenge that being faced by the organization in implementing the demand forecasting model, usually the customer's intention doesn't translate into the actual behavior. Okay, all right, so we look to the uh, analog forecasting and judgmental forecasting. They have analog forecasting. Usually in these types of forecasting is determine and similar item to the item that being forecast, and then they use the analog demand history as a basis for the forecast for the net sales. Okay, so what are the challenge to this practice? Actually, it is quite difficult to select the appropriate analog to use. Okay, so we can see some of the companies that are using the uh, judgmental forecasting, right? Second one, they use time series forecasting. Okay, these types of forecasting is obviously the solely depends on the previous demand. Okay, so they can do a prediction doing uh, by forecasting on the previous demand. Let's say if this year sales there will higher 7% higher than last year's sale, so the times in time series forecast they will predict there will be 7% higher for the next year. Okay, so this is the method that being implemented that being practiced in time series forecasting. And actually, these types of forecasting is quantitative, is a calculative. So these types of strategy has to summing up the demand across different time periods and then dividing by the number of time periods. So the need to do calculations, okay, which is quite different with the judgmental forecasting just that I mentioned before. Okay, so time series forecasting usually have their shortcoming. Okay, usually there's in the calculations sometimes they're not able to have equipped data, enough data. Okay, so it's also quite challenge uh, to do the forecasting in terms of time series. The third strategies or method that have been used in forecasting, known as cause and effect, which is also known as associative forecasting. So, how these types of forecasting is being implemented? Okay, in cause and effect forecasting, usually it assumes that one or more factors are related to demand and that the relationship between cause and effect. Okay, that relationship between cause and effect can be used to estimate future demand. Okay, so in example, um, usually there tends to be an inverse relationship between level of interest rates and consumers' ability to buy a house. Okay, in short, let's say interest rate increase, there will be decreasing in sale of housing. Okay, so usually the example of cause and effect forecasting usually they are being calculated by using simple and multiple regressions. Okay, they use a calculation in a statistic way. So sometimes the demand is dependent on variables or two variables incurred in these types of forecasting. There are some issues occurred in demand forecasting model. The first one in terms of selection of forecasting. Okay, most of the things that need to be considered in the uh, demand forecasting, it is very important for them to recognize that the selection of forecasting models is depends on the variety of factors like as in terms of time, money, accuracy of the various forecasting techniques. Okay, so I want to give you an example like Apple's. Okay, Apple's corporations at the first place they have is doing the initial say estimated for the iPod, okay, which has introduced in long time ago, and they were based on judgment and intuition. So it means they are using the forecasting technique, the first model, okay, which is they are based on the judgmental forecasting method. So actually, as we know, iPod is not only a new product, okay? It is a revolutionary product. Okay, so the managers must understand time and monetary cost, which is associated with each particular forecasting technique. Okay, so in example, in the selection of forecasting model based on the calculating method, based on the survey or analog, usually it is time using and also cost using because they need to do a survey. Okay, so the forecasting accuracy also becomes an issue in demand forecasting, which they need to um, refers to the relationship between the actual and forecasted demand and the need to determine the accuracy. Okay, sometimes the accuracy being affected by various consideration by various factors. Okay, and one of the challenges they need to face is uh, this forecasting likely to generate a different revenue estimate. Okay, so in terms of forecasting have becomes one of the important things that to be looked. Okay, because sometimes there are always inaccurate demand forecasts for certain items. Okay, so what can be done in solving these issues actually? So the practitioners in the logistic process or they have used the concept collaborative planning, forecasting and replenishment, CPFR, known as CPFR. Okay, so they use this concept where the supply chain partners share planning and forecasting data so they can match up supply and demand. Okay, so in this concept, actually, the supply chain partners will be working from a collectively agreed to single forecast number as opposed to each member working off its own forecast projection. Okay, so these kinds of collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment actually have increased their sales revenues, have decreased the safety stock, and higher order fill rates, and it has improved the forecasting accuracy. For instance, ERP, the Enterprise Resource Planning system conceptually have led to much lower forecasting errors. Okay, so by using the ERP based forecast, they have have implemented ERP based forecast. Actually, they have reduced the forecasting errors about 20% among the companies that had practiced ERP based forecast.